Welcome, everyone, to Mythstorie, a podcast about myths and history. I am one of your jolly hosts with my permanent guest, Cammy. Hello, Cammy.
Hello, Bryant.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas
Happy,
to you.
happy Christmas
Happy Christmas.
in it. We are releasing this on Christmas Day, so stop what you're doing and listen, and then let us know what you think. We're not going to be releasing one the following Wednesday in lieu of this, but we're releasing this on Christmas because we decided that A Christmas Carol was legit enough for us to talk about in our wide spectrum of possible topics, and it's been a really cool thing to look into, right?
Oh, absolutely. We started with looking into the tradition of ghost stories on Christmas, which was huge in the Victorian times, and even before that. But this kind of revived that tradition for these people. So this is sort of
Yeah,
the quintessential Christmas ghost story.
right. Yeah, it made me think of when we talked about Frankenstein, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. That's kind of how they started it, right? They were like away for the holidays, and they were like, "Oh, let's write a ghost story in the lodge." I don't know. It was around the same time too, roughly. But yeah, so Charles Dickens, the author of A Christmas Carol, what is the official name? In prose, being a ghost story of Christmas. That's the full name. I don't know if you caught that.
No, I didn't, because my
Yeah,
source just said A Christmas Carol
that's what
by
everyone calls
Charles
it now.
Dickens, narrated by LeVar Burton.
Right. Yeah. So,
Available free on Apple.
right. Oh, the audiobook is
Yeah.
the red one by
Yeah,
LeVar.
don't
Oh,
you wish you had an Apple device now?
thanks, Mr. Burton. I can get it. Um, that's wonderful. Yeah, it's definitely in the open domain in many ways, as you can tell. So, well, as you know, on the show, Cammy gives us a story, and then I'll lead a discussion. So that's exactly what's going to happen. Cammy's going to read the entirety of A Christmas Carol, right?
Correct. Yeah,
The
the
whole
entire
thing,
160 pages of
right?
that. And
So,
then not a summary. Nope. Just
right. So
no,
grab
I
your
condensed it to like 2.5 pages.
right, which I'll tell you, someone else did back in the 1800s, and they got sued. So,
Oh,
can't happen
really?
now, though.
Well, he's dead.
Right? Yeah.
So
All right, Cammy. Well, go ahead and give us that wonderful story, and then we'll have a nice little discussion.
absolutely. And Bryant and I have our mulled wine
Yes, yeah. I
here.
was like,
Thank you,
get
Bryant.
your mulled wine, your hot, warm German Glühwein, and sit back and enjoy.
Okay, like I said, I use the I listened to LeVar Burton read it, which was amazing. He did such a good
Absolutely.
job, of course.
Yeah.
But put out by the earlier visit from his nephew, who had the sole purpose of inviting him to a worthless Christmas dinner, Ebenezer Scrooge braved the bitter winter chill of Christmas Eve and walked the long blocks to his stately yet derelict abode. "Christmas dinner? Bah humbug," he said as he reached his own door knocker. But as he fumbled in his pocket for his keys, the knocker began to glow and came to life in the likeness of his old business partner, the very dead Jacob Marley. Scrooge stumbled back and almost fell down his front stoop from the shock, but as he stood up, the door knocker had returned to its normal hue and was the face of a gargoyle again. Scrooge hurried inside and fixed himself dinner. As he walked up his stairs, the tiredness hit him, for he saw the likeness of a hearse drawn by 2 horses riding his staircase. He ran to his room to find the great din of dragging metal, and then appeared Jacob Marley, shackled to several weights with long, heavy chains. The apparition spoke. "Ebenezer Scrooge, chained as I am to these weights with the links I have forged these 7 years dead, you will be twice cursed, for your chains would have been this long 7 years ago." Scrooge could not believe he was in the presence of a ghost of his long-dead friend, but he pressed on in case it was true. "How can I avoid your fate? Ebenezer, tonight, when the clock strikes 1, you will have the first of 3 visitors who will show you the way. You must change your life before it's too late." The ghost disappeared just as quickly and as noisily as he had come. Scrooge decided that he must be tired and put himself to bed, but he could not sleep. He watched the clock as it turned each hour until it struck 1 a.m., and a little glow appeared around the room, and a soft voice spoke. "Ebenezer Scrooge, I am the ghost of Christmas past." "Long past?" Scrooge asked. "Your past," the ghost replied. And just then the room around them started to disappear. They found themselves traveling along a path long forgotten but familiar to Scrooge. He recognized the way to his old schoolhouse, and there Scrooge was, just a boy, as he watched the other children left for the holidays with their families, while he stayed behind. Then the ghost whisked him through to another Christmas, where he was seen sitting across from a lovely yet sad woman. She was speaking to the younger Scrooge and urging him to give up his idol of money. But he was too greedy by this time to understand what he was about to lose. The woman stood up and walked out of his office, never to return to her husband. The present day Scrooge formed a tear in his eye, but wiped it quickly and begged the spirit to take him away from this place. Then Scrooge was deposited back in his bed, and he rolled to his side and stared again at the clock. He started to drift into sleep, though it was not restful, and after some time the clock struck loudly and woke Scrooge with a startle. He saw growing in his bedchamber a mound of Christmas cakes and pies and ham and geese and fruits and wine and countless other foods that all looked delicious and filling to the miser who mostly survived on porridge. And on top of this mound of food was a giant, not unlike Bacchus himself, barely clad in a robe and a scabbard around his waist, though he carried no sword. The vision laughed and spoke to Scrooge. I am the ghost of Christmas present. I am to show you the things as they are. Scrooge nodded, and with that the great giant laughed, and the room around him began to spin. Scrooge could barely keep his footing, but they landed on a joyous scene. His employee, Bob Cratchit, and his family were just sitting down to dinner. They had a meager meal for the many children that surrounded the table, but every one of them looked especially grateful to be there. Then Scrooge's eyes focused on a boy with a cane who seemed to barely able to sit up at the table to eat his meal. The boy, will he make it? Scrooge managed to speak the words, though softly. If the tides do not change, he will not make it to the new year, the ghost said. Scrooge hung his head. Just then he heard his name. Let us make a toast to Mr. Scrooge, who made this meal possible. Bob spoke joyously, but his wife cut him off. I wish Scrooge was here to see this toast. I would give him something else, a piece of my mind to feast upon. Now, dear, it's Christmas. Let us make merry. What does it hurt to raise a glass to him? The wife raised her glass. In the spirit of the season, bless him, but not for his own well-being, but for yours. Everyone raised their glasses and toasted the man, and the scene began to fade as the two spun again to a new destination. Scrooge's nephew was surrounded by men and women making merry at his house. Each one looked full from a delicious meal. Why was your uncle not to come this year? A friend of his nephew asked. Why, he's too good for us, of course, the nephew said. But I feel sorry for him. He knows not what he misses. He probably settled in with porridge at home when he could have had a glorious feast. But who does he hurt when he chooses to ignore us? Only himself. He thinks Christmas is a humbug, but we know it's time for being grateful for your fellow man. Everyone nodded in agreement, and the scene faded again, and Scrooge was back in his room feeling rather somber. The jolly spirit now not so jolly. Scrooge, you must change your ways, for when you see what is to come, you will have regrets. Then the piles of food he used as a throne began to disappear, and so he too faded, and Scrooge fell asleep again. He was in the middle of a dreamless sleep when the room began to become so cold, Scrooge shuddered awake. Then the clock struck again, and a very dark, hooded figure floated towards him. Scrooge took his hand, but he was fearful. You must be the ghost of Christmas yet to come. The figure nodded, and then led Scrooge to his grim future. The two saw a group of ne'er-do-wells hovering over a body. Each person discussed what items they would take from the poor departed soul. The figure pointed to the face, which was covered, but Scrooge refused to look. He knew what he was seeing without being shown. At his refusal, the spirit whisked him off to a graveyard where the headstone read, Ebenezer Scrooge. The man was so frightened at this that he tried to run, but was powerless against the spirit. The headstone stated his death to be December 25th, but Scrooge could not make out the year, and not a soul came to mourn him on Christmas Day. Then the spirit faded, and Scrooge found himself in a fitful sleep, barely able to wake. But when he did awake, he was a changed man. Christmas Day brought a joy in him it had never brought before. He leapt from his bed and ran to the street, stopping to sing with the carolers as he passed and greeting everyone with Merry Christmas. When he arrived at the butcher, he had them deliver the prized Christmas turkey to the Cratchit household so they would have enough to fill everyone's belly at Christmas. And then he found himself at his nephew's door. He almost turned around without knocking, but his nephew's wife saw him in the street and greeted him heartily and made him sit down for dinner. And so it was from that day forth, Scrooge became a better man. He was like a second father to Tiny Tim, and raised Bob Cratchit's salary to better provide for his family. He also made his own family a priority, never missing another dinner with them. And it was said he was said to keep Christmas better than any man.
Yay! I can
Yay!
imagine. So Kyle, one of Kyle's absolute favorite movies is The Muppet Christmas Carol. So I'm just imagining, like when his Cratchit's wife gets off on him. I'm just thinking Miss Piggy. That's all I can
Wait, is
imagine.
that who Cratchit's wife is? Oh no, that's
Yeah,
terrible for her.
yeah. No, it's really great. That movie has no business being as good as it is, thanks to Michael Caine.
I
Yes,
remember seeing that when I was younger, but I don't think I've watched it since. And I think
you
Candace
should.
has a VHS of it, so we'll probably watch
Even
it
better.
tonight. Yeah,
Even
she loves
better.
the
Yeah.
Muppets.
Even better. Yeah. It is really great, and it's interesting. I mean, we know the story so well, and it was really fun to dive into this. I've never looked at this in like a scholastic way, and so reading about it was really fun, and finding the origins. And there's as you can tell, there's tons of BuzzFeedy 10 things you should know about Dickens writing this story. But and a lot of it's great. A lot of it was rehashes of other things, but Britannica and Wikipedia did a great job of summing it up. Britannica had an article, Why Dickens Wrote a Christmas Carol by J.E. Lewbering. And essentially, so he was already established at this point, and he was going to an event in 1843, intended to raise money for this group called the Athenaeum and or Athenaeum. They were kind of like a philanthropic organization for the poor, for the working poor, I should say. So, like, think this is like we're in the heat of industrialization. I mean, this is when you could be the ripe old age of like 20 to die
When
of
did
like
he write
cholera.
it?
The book was published on 1843, so weeks after this. Because this was October, and he released it in December.
Oh
So
wow.
six
Okay, so
weeks after
he
this
just
event,
got a
just
bug
it
and just did it. Yeah.
right, yeah, and that's he could really see, and the problem, the want and ignorance of the story. That's what he could see. People wanting and people being ignorant, and those are the two things that he saw were basically feeding the poor. And he was a Dickens was a longtime advocate of workers' rights, children's rights. Like 1843. This is when it was literally like at its worst for the most part.
Yeah,
Spring Hill Jack
in
was
this
terrorizing
story.
everybody. But no, go
Yeah, in
ahead.
this story he's talking, I mean, of course I had a very summarized version so it didn't
Yeah.
go into this, but the little kids were already being told of where they were going to work
Hmm.
around the table at Christmas. So
Yeah. Yeah, that 100%. That was it. Yeah, it was just the way it was, because if you didn't, I mean, there was no schooling, and it was the only way to do it. So, one thing I really liked in this article, though, and helped kind of cement why we should talk about it was, um, Britannica notes that he would write several Christmas books, and they were popular in their time, and they had very similar themes and things like that. But this one, I mean, this immediately hit the stage too, and then Dickens did tours of reading it, and it really Britannica says it became a modern fairy tale, and it truly did. It was wild. It had the same effect of like Chaucer and Shakespeare in an instant, but with like I think the big thing with this story is how approachable it is, and how anyone can read it and understand it.
yeah,
And
it's
Dickens, I think, just does that really well.
even in that because he does write in his time, so
Yeah.
it's not as easy to read as like something else, a
Right.
novella that would be written now, but
Yeah.
it is only 160 pages, like
Hmm.
kind of average at that, normal size type and all that.
Right.
So it is a quick read, and I
Yeah.
listened to it in, I think it was like 3.5 hours.
Yeah. And Kyle, my wife told me that Patrick Stewart, who knows LeVar Burton quite well, is currently, he just started a TikTok, and he is reading it in chunks on TikTok right now. He's performing it on TikTok.
Oh
So,
wow, yeah, that's
yeah,
pretty
you can
cool.
totally do it in that micro. It's like people who write, novels on Twitter for some reason, but you can do that too. You just, chunk at a time. So yeah, so 6 weeks after he went to this event, he was able to push this thing out, and it was quite amazing. It was a little tumultuous financially at first. So Dickens, funny enough, like he was very particular and involved with the printing process of it. And he wanted it, the book was expensive. It was an expensive book to buy. The first 6,000 copies, of course, sold out, but it was kind of ironic that it wasn't as approachable. I went to in the reception page on Wikipedia. It was very well received, but there was a few magazines were like, it's so the binding is so expensive. Like, make it cheaper. Like what are you doing? Here we go. Yeah, the New Monthly magazine praised the story, but thought the book's physical excesses, the gilt edges, and expensive binding kept the price high, making it unavailable to the poor. The review recommended that the tale should be printed on sheet paper and priced accordingly. So, but Dickens seemed like he. I wish I could know more about Dickens. I would love to have taken like a course on him now, especially after this. And so please chime in if you do know more. Let us know.
We'll talk to Peter.
Right. Yeah. And he seemed to be very involved and like this was like his product, and so he wanted it to be presented well. He didn't want it to be printed cheaply because I think he kind of knew the story would be there. And so he did do these. He would go around and read it, and I don't know if he charged, but it did help the sales. I know that. So I'm guessing he would go do just kind of like today. You do a reading.
They read an excerpt.
An excerpt, yeah, and then copies that you have sell. But he probably did the readings for free and stuff like that. So and it was very popular to be read and things like that. Dickens himself. So the most I've had kind of with Dickens, other than just kind of in general knowing who he was, I mentioned this before. Patrick Anal is a professor. He works with the Great Courses Company, and he did a really cool course. He does a ton of great courses on like Britain, and he did one on Victorian Britain, and it was really nice. And I listened to it, and he talked about like writing, and Dickens was so integral with the Victorian Britain was such a influential period, and Queen Victoria herself was so influential. It's crazy to think how one woman could change the country so much. But Dickens was like definitely in that same part. He was changing so much. He was such a master writer. He could write like it was nobody's business. And what I do remember Allet mentioning how one thing that he did, Dickens did, was he would like name people these things, and Scrooge is such a great example of this. Like, it's not a word, it's
right.
like,
but it feels like one.
It's
a description of someone, and you know exactly what he means when he says it.
100%, and it actually entered the Oxford Dictionary to mean like an old miser. Like, and even so like he would name these people these like onomatopoeia or these words that had these feelings that like weren't words, but you could tell. Any kind of normal
Cratchit
learner.
Like it sounds like someone who's had a hard life.
Yes,
too. And I think isn't Cratchit like a word now too?
I imagine, and of course Bah Humbug was entered into, and it was used colloquially afterwards.
I wanted to ask you about that because we talked about this is a future episode for everyone else, but we've already recorded it.
I was thinking this too. Yeah. It's our next episode, isn't it?
I think it's our next one. Yeah. So it's a little spoiler.
So we're going to talk about the creature of the bugbear, which is kind of like a phrase too. And I don't know. I'm guess it has to be like the word bug has an interesting etymology in the British Islands. It comes from like a Welsh stemming and stuff like that. It's like bugga. So I'm thinking, because you think of it, and it at some point, like in the early medieval period, it was like scary, like fairies, but then later it became like, this bugs me. And so you could kind of see this evolution where in the 18th
a humbug, it sounds like it's even more like bothersome and annoying, like it's humming at you too.
So I love it. I don't know. I'll try and see if I can find a connection later, because we did record that already before we did this one. So even though it's gonna release later, that'll be fun. I'll see if I can mention something in the comments of that episode once we publish it. But anyway, that I just want to, for anyone who isn't like a Dickensian master scholar, that's kind of like it in a nutshell, a super nutshell for how he goes. And he was a wonderful guy. A quick thing about him: he was born in 1812. He died in 1870. He was 58. I pretty much mentioned what he was like. He was an avid writer. He edited 15 novels, 5 novellas, hundreds of short stories and nonfiction articles, lectured, performed readings, indefatigable letter writer, and campaigned vigorously for children's rights, education, and social reforms. That was Wikipedia's thing about him in a nutshell. He was an amazing man of his time, completely influenced writing. Many contemporary writers, like Tolstoy, even Mark Twain commented. If Mark Twain didn't like the story, they would call him that Christian writer. Some of the Russian novelists would call him that.
Wait, Mark
And
Twain didn't like the story?
Mark Twain did not like the story. I can't remember what his exact word was, but he said it didn't have like a soul or something like that. I
He
don't know.
he
I
is
think
so funny. Like,
I
we
know.
should do something with Twain. Like, he is
Yeah,
really
that would
very
be a good.
opinionated.
Yeah, I one criticism I saw was I think people thought this was like for like this was too unintellectual, maybe. Although, I mean, of course, like the analysis on this story is insane. Especially, I really enjoyed reading the debate on like how secular it is or isn't. I really enjoyed that. Just little blurbs. I don't really have anything. It's just
They,
it's
you know,
there's
they so apparently before this, and I don't know how true this is because I didn't look into it. That
mhm.
people didn't really care about Christmas as much. Like, it was
Yes,
sort of a
yeah.
thing, and then
I can talk
they
about that next.
after
Yeah,
this, it was like insane. But
yeah. With
we
that,
have a very secular view of Christmas now.
mhm.
I mean, there's a
And
lot of people who do
it's
not have
been like
religion
that.
that celebrate it.
Oh my goodness, yeah, like, go to Japan right now, and they love holidays there, and, like, everything is, like, Christmased up, you know? I mean, people like celebrating things in general, and, I mean, we could always have that fun. I think it's a kind of a bit of a tired, fact that Christmas was, like, a pagan solstice event, and then,
Sure.
like many other things, was Christianized to be like, "Hey, actually, that pagan guy was, like, he once talked to Jesus, actually, so that's what actually happened, so please, Christian help, please. I'm a medieval monk." So yeah, to your point though, Queen Victoria, like I was saying, how Dickens and Victoria were in tandem, this part of this revolution of England, a cultural revolution. Um, Victoria led. She was, I believe, like a German descent. I think she spoke fluent German. I'm quite
Yeah.
positive.
Wait,
And there was
wait, was it her sons that were the three kings
yes, yeah, spoilers for World War One. Yes. Yeah, she was the one who had.
or grandsons,
They were
right?
grandsons. Yeah, the
Yeah, because we
grandsons
already
for
talked
World
about
War
this in the
One. We
Rasputin
did.
episode. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. So this is when it was all, yeah, very interconnected, and the like Germany wasn't Germany quite yet, but there was a lot of connection there. King George, her dad, I guess, the George of the Revolution, um, had like he was partly German, I believe. Anyway, she brought this. She and her husband Prince Albert brought the tree into the house, started decorating it. Fashion statement. Everyone loved it. Started doing it. They also helped. It wasn't them directly, but there were several books that were written that of old carols that, because caroling was a thing a couple hundred years ago, but it had kind of died out, and then it was coming back. And urbanization and industrialization was a big part of tearing down Christmas. It seems like the old kind of countryside or village was the place where you would do Christmas, and maybe still do it, where those old traditional values were. But as industrialization came, it kind of went away. So Victoria helped bring it back in tandem with this, the caroling making a return. And then Dickens writes a story in an industrial oppressed urban area where they're sitting around the table and basically doing what we do today. So everyone had an exact like map, a routine in this book by Dickens, in A Christmas Carol, on how to celebrate Christmas, even though your life isn't that great and cholera is going to kill you probably tomorrow. But yeah, and you're super packed. But yes, that was it. So it was this like perfect storm to bring Christmas, and that really helped set the model of today. And I mean, this started to go crazy. This went to the States. This started getting translated. It went everywhere. A lot of people absolutely loved it. Yeah, here we the publication of Davies Gilbert's 1823 work, Some Ancient Christmas Carols. So that came out, and then another book, 1833 collection of Christmas carols, ancient and modern. So Christmas carols were starting to ramp up. This is 20 and 10 years before. So uh, yeah, this is wonderful, and of course Victoria doing that. So again, it was just this like wonderful like ramp up into what we kind of know Christmas classically as, like the Christmas that we see in A Christmas Carol is like the ultimate version of what's coming up. And then after the book is disseminated, it starts to take over England and then even America and other Western nations and stuff like that. So that's a lot of like the fun stuff in a way. I mentioned how the book wasn't actually a huge financial success because of the expensive binding. Another thing was a group tried to another publishing company did like an unauthorized version that was like summarized, paraphrased, and he sued and won, but they were bankrupt and poor. That's why they were stealing people's work, and so he basically had to pay the legal fees. So that took more out of what he made. I mean, obviously, I'm sure he's definitely made more than he thought he would have, but probably can't, enjoy that as much. But it was immediately put to the stage. This book also helped bring the term Merry Christmas out, which had been used in England in the 1500s. But this brought it kind of back. I mean, Happy Christmas is still commonly used, but Merry Christmas isn't super uncommon either in England. So either one would work. No one would freak out. I know, and I remember watching Harry Potter when I was a kid, and they say it in there, and I'm like, they say Happy Christmas, what? But yeah, Bah Humbug, Scrooge, so many editions. Every sitcom in the world has had their episode, and several movie renditions of this, live and
It's a Wonderful
cartoon.
Life is the story, basically.
Yep. Um, and it really, really fun. He did several more stories after this that were very successful, that just didn't quite stick around today. Lots of fun themes around the same of, rights, workers' rights, social rights. Uh, and it was really cool to see. There was like many reports of a wave of charitable giving increased. The mode of Wales, the Queen of Norway, who was the daughter of King Edward VII, she was from 1905 to 1938. She actually sent toys to London's like crippled children houses that they had, and they would be signed with Tiny Tim's love. And in 1867, an American businessman actually closed his factory on Christmas Day and gave every employee a turkey. So he totally went Scrooge on that, and many other novelists, Robert Louis Stevenson, Thomas Carlyle, they also did these big public kind of charitable acts afterwards, and many others too. And there was a lot of writing. Everyone felt that it was the case. That this really helped change things and helped erase some of the ignorance that Dickens was hoping to. So he definitely succeeded in what he wanted to do for sure. And it's really fun to see that. And I mean, watching the movie, you always feel that, The last thing I have, and I thought this was really fun, was starting in the 30s, the film versions started to pop out, and they were actually like different in the UK and the US. I thought this was fun.
Really?
Yeah, so Wikipedia says British-made films showed a traditional telling, while the US-made works showing Cratchit in a more central role. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Escaping the depression caused by European bankers and celebrating the Christmas of the common man. In the 60s, Scrooge was sometimes portrayed as a Freudian figure wrestling with his past, and by the 80s, he was again set in a world of depression and economic uncertainty. So it looks like the story kind of evolves with the times. It has the same central themes, but it reflects what's going on in some cases.
Yeah, it's almost as if like what is considered like miserly or villainous in that time is portrayed.
Yeah, I love it. I thought that was really cool to hear, to think about the retelling of a story being so moldable, and it is. I mean, that's why it's been. I mean, hundreds of television shows, cartoons, movies have done the story with their own formula, with their cast of characters and stuff like that. And but it's fun to think of if you're just trying to recreate it. It's like the what was that, Romeo and Juliet with the guns in Chicago or whatever it was.
Oh,
It's like
well,
that.
yeah,
Yeah, with
well, it was in
Romeo X
California, but
Juliet
yeah,
or
it was
whatever.
really good.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I think
I mean, they
that was
used
a
the
community joke.
exact same dialogue that
Right.
Shakespeare had written or whatever. I mean, they
Right.
followed the play exactly, but then yeah,
Yeah.
it was just modern day.
Yeah. So I think that
That
it's really
guy who
fun.
did that is brilliant. I can't remember his name right now.
Wasn't it Guy Ritchie?
No, no,
No.
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 He has similar takes though, like in the shots. It was the same guy that did Moulin Rouge, I think.
Hold on, I'm
You're looking
looking
it
it
up.
up. I'm looking it up. Why isn't it up there? Directed
He
by
also did
Baz Luhrmann.
ba- uh
Boz Luhrmann, Australian film director.
Ballroom something, Strictly Ballroom
Yeah.
was like his first movie.
Okay. Yeah, it was Baz or Boz Luhrmann, and the screenplay was by him and Craig Pierce.
I'm almost positive he's the same person that did Moulin Rouge. I don't know.
I would believe it. I believe it. I would absolutely believe it. Oh yes, he did. He did. Cammy's right. She won the Jeopardy question. Good job, Cammy.
Well, they're so similar in the way they're shot, and then they have a lot of the same cast too. Like John
yeah.
Leguizamo's in it. I can't remember anybody else, but I do
Yeah.
remember him being in it.
Oh, no, that's a good point. Well, Cammy, this has been a nice long episode, so we'll let the people go so they can finally get back to their families.
Enjoy Christmas with their families.
Right. We appreciate everyone here. Thanks for joining us on this in South Carolina, an actually cold Christmas. Very, very cold Christmas.
Yeah. No snow though, ever.
No. February, it's coming. two more months, a month and a half. Let us know what you think. And if you have any suggestions for any episodes we should talk about, any topics, please let us know. You can comment here directly or mythstorie@gmail.com. Join our Facebook group too. We love to hear from you all. And yeah, happy Christmas, Merry Christmas, happy holidays.
Happy Christmas.
Cool. All right, everyone. Well, my wine's gone. So cheers to you though. And we will see you next time.
Oh.
Bah
Humbug.